Hillsiders, the last couple of Wednesdays we've had videos talking about the story of Israel being delivered from Egypt and heading towards the Promised Land. It's in Numbers 13 and 14. It's about after 12 generations of slavery, God sent Moses to gather up the people of Israel, see them delivered from Egypt, and head to the land that he'd promised years and years prior to Abraham. He said, I'm going to give this to your descendants. They are led miraculously through the desert with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Wherever the cloud went, they would go too. They had miraculous food in the form of manna. They had miraculous water when they didn't have any. Moses hit a rock and water gushed out. So they've seen God do these miraculous signs and wonders in addition to delivering them from Egypt. And so they get to the edge of the Promised Land, and Moses sends one representative from each of the 12 tribes into this land that's been promised. It's not just this land that nobody knows anything about. This is the land that has been promised to them by God. They've been talking about this for generations. These 12 representatives, one from each tribe, are supposed to go into the land and then give a report on what they find. The 12 spies go in, and then they come back, and they all have a similar report when it comes to how good the land is. They talk about it being a land of plenty, a land of blessing, a land where all your wildest dreams are going to come true because there's just so many great things there. 10 of the 12 spies, however, have a radically different take on the inhabitants of the land. They look at these giants who live there and said, we're like grasshoppers in their sight, and they're not even worried about us. There's no way on God's green earth we're going to be able to go in there and get rid of these guys. So let's just go back to Egypt. Joshua and Caleb were so against that. They said, you know what? Yeah, the giants are there. They saw everything that the other 10 spies saw, but they had a radically different response. Their response was, if God's going to give this to us, we can go in here and it doesn't matter who lives there because the God of angel armies is on our side and he goes before us. And for some reason, the nation of Israel listened to the 10 spies and not to Joshua and Caleb. And the 10 spies whose names have long been forgotten convinced Israel, we need to go back to Egypt, the place that we know. In the last couple of weeks, we've talked about some of the things that may have motivated that fear, a spirit of slavery, the unknown, people who were kind of hedging their bets because they were serving multiple gods. You know, you don't live for 430 years in Egypt and have 12 generations just saturated in Egyptian culture without picking up some Egyptian slavery baggage where they probably were worshiping gods that they'd learned about in Egypt, and along the way that they, just in case, we'll worship this one too. But today I'm going to just briefly look at Joshua and Caleb. What made Joshua and Caleb's report about the Promised Land and about God's intention to give it to them so different from the report of the 10? And Scripture reveals in Numbers chapter 14, verse 24, God says, in my servant Caleb, I saw a different spirit, and he served me wholeheartedly. And we have to believe that he's talking about Joshua too, because Joshua was included in this promise. They had a different spirit. Now, I wish I could say, what that different spirit was, but it doesn't. The text doesn't really go into more detail. But when it says they served God wholeheartedly, what we can learn about that is they did not have any other gods that they were following in their life. It was obvious that they'd given 100% of their faith, of their hope, of their future into the hands of God, and they believed that he was able to do what he said he was going to do. Joshua and Caleb were not these just incredible men, and the other 10 were just like these, wimpy wimps who didn't have any guts. These were the leaders. These are the people who would have been the best of the best of the best of these tribes. The ones that are going to be, if you had to pick a representative, these are the guys you want there. So there was something different where Joshua and Caleb could say, the situation that is going to be required for us to go into the Promised Land, it's not just in our physical ability, it's in the spiritual ability and God's ability to do what he says he's going to do on our behalf. So instead of looking at our own resources and looking at how small we are, we're going to be people who will go in and trust that God's going to empower us and he's going to drive the nations out in front of us. And that some of the time we're not even going to have to do the battle, we just need to be obedient, go into it. Now, when I start thinking about this, it makes me want to be a person who's like Joshua and Caleb. And I ask God, Lord, give me a different spirit. Give me a spirit that takes your word at face value. Lord, give me a spirit that is full of faith, that does not doubt. Lord, expose any little g gods or idols that I may have picked up along the way in my 51 years of life. I don't want those to influence me. I don't want a love of safety and a love of protection and a love of just knowing how things are going to go to keep me from moving forward into God's inheritance for me. Because if I do that, if I don't follow God into his inheritance for me, not only am I going to miss out, but the people who've come after me, my kids and my grandkids and their kids are going to miss out. Because when we're walking into God's inheritance for us, it's never just about us. It's about those who are coming next. The next thing I'm praying for is, Lord, help me to follow you wholeheartedly. The scripture in Psalms that says, search me, Father, know my heart. Try me, know my mind. And if there's any wicked way in me, pull me to the rock everlasting. Psalm 139, 23 and 24. It's a prayer I pray all the time. And I'm praying that over you. I want us as a church family to have a mindset that's not tinted and tainted by fear and tainted by worry and tainted by only the things that we can see, and that we can't suppose that there's something beyond what we could accomplish on our own, that maybe God is going to actually do what he said he's going to do. That we'd be people who we're not reckless, but we're faith-filled. And we're not hopeless or lunatics just to go out and just do crazy stuff. But we're people who are willing to say, I'm going to be wholeheartedly devoted to God. I'm going to show it not just in my words, but I'm going to show it in the way I think and in the way I act. And I'm going to speak faithfully and faith-filled to the people around me. And I'm going to trust that when God says you can do this, even if the rest of the world says no, his way and his words are what really matters. Anyway, I hope this is something that speaks to you. Join me in praying those prayers. We want to have a different spirit, the Spirit of God dwelling inside of us. And we want to be wholeheartedly devoted to him. Right on. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.